Welcome to the Transformational Learning Summit, Craig and Patricia. It's really great to have this conversation with you.
Great to
Hi.
be here.
Yeah.
I'm really honored to have a conversation with you because you both spent a lifetime, a career that spanned a lifetime, bringing people together in ways that generate deep engagement and humanity. And so I'm really curious about what's going to emerge through this discussion and exploration together. And I'd love to start um, just around this topic of transformation. Obviously, this is the Transformational Learning Summit, and everybody has a slightly different understanding or relationship to this word. So I would love to hear your definition of what transformation means.
I'd love for you to start.
Okay. I think we might agree on this,
We do.
having been together for 28 years in this work. When we think of transformation, I think we think of a shift in the essence of anything, everything. We're transforming something from where it was to where it will be, or what's emerging. So there's a lot of emergence in the word transformation. It's being used in many different ways. Usually people talk about it as synonymous with change.
Right.
For us, it's not. For us, it's meaning, how do we transform the essence of something from where it was to where it will be? And what's the possibility? What are the opportunities? What's the shift that we all desire? I think in our hearts, in our work, in our hearts, we all want the same thing. So how do we get there? And so there's this transformative or, place that I think all of us desire, but we don't know how to get there. And I think that was the basis of our work when we started back in 1995 working together, was what are those transformative questions? What's the inquiry? And then what are the practices? What are the outcomes that we all expect from one another? And we started doing that in the workaday world. We started doing that back because we both had come out of organizational work, me out of publishing, Patricia as well, and education. And so we wanted to offer an opportunity, and we found that in relationships. And very early on, we called it the technology of relationship. How do we transform, what wasn't working for folks into something that would work?
Yeah. So let me just go back to transformation. Say it again. The transformation in the essence.
The shift in the essence of something.
So if you know the story of imaginal cells, which has to do with whatever the imagination of the caterpillar, the monarch caterpillar, as it goes into the cocoon and liquefies and emerges a butterfly, that's what we're talking about. That butterfly will never be a caterpillar again. But whatever the caterpillar holds is a sense of itself and of its future, of its positive future. And we think everybody holds that sense, that imagination of a world that works for all, which is our vision statement, a just, inclusive, and interconnected world, a world that works for all. Well, that is totally, I mean, we're not even at the caterpillar stage yet, possibly, but we could, if enough of us hold that vision that there is a possibility of a world that works for all, and we can all go into the caterpillar stage together. And once we do, there's no going back. There's only going forward. That's transformation.
I think most folks know that this notion of transformation is occurring, that there's really no going back to where we were, which is, people talk about normality, right? Going back from the pandemic into normal life. Well, things are shifting, and we're shifting it from a place of fear to a place of possibility.
Mm.
So how do we create the spaces? And Lorenz, you and I, we're all in the same business here of holding space. So we hold space for people in a way. It's shepherding, midwifing. It's holding that space for this transformational process to occur. That's what we do. Just hold it. And sometimes it's just, ooh, just being present, totally being present while people shift, while we all shift. And we talk about people, but it's global. It's all beings. When we talk about beings, we're not just talking about people, we're talking about all things. So
But your early Craig, I will credit with a lot of where the seeds of where we are today with Center for Purposeful Leadership was your realization and recognition is that when two or more gather, there's always an opportunity for transformation, because there's a transformational artist couple, Alex and Allison Gray. And one of her sayings is that every moment is an opportunity for transformation and love. That's not quite it, but every moment. So this doesn't have to be big and global. It has to be here and local, and to consider it with the next time you're with someone. How is that an opportunity to be transformed by being in relationship with them, possibly in a new way? And that new way would just be present to the fact that they are a human being with you, wanting a positive future for themselves and the people they care about. Right?
Yeah, a lot of what we're doing, I think it is around bringing love into action. That's really at the center of the work that we do. And how do we manifest that? How do we apply that? How do we bring that into our workaday world? How do we bring that into our families, our communities, our workplaces, all of that? And so this sense of love, this sense of our essence, because another thing that we hold is that the essence of being human is love. So when we look at the essential self in transformation, in transforming ourselves, what are we transforming into? That's a big question. What is this notion? I don't think we actually know. But when we look at ourselves as vehicles for bringing love into possibility, that's huge. I mean, that's huge. And sometimes when I really get depressed, I mean, I do, and I get, I'm just, I was listening to an interview with Bruce Springsteen, and even talking about being really depressed and writing his stuff, and I thought, gosh, that sounds so much like me, coming out of that place into an acknowledgement that lifts an opportunity.
And that's why this work matters, why this conversation matters.
Yeah.
Why the work that we all do matters is that it's regenerative. Being in a space of love fills me up again. I get depleted, I get scared, I get afraid. And all I have to do is get in a conversation with somebody like Lorenz, and all of a sudden, I'm filling myself back up. It's a homeopathic.
Yeah.
To be in this space and to commit to being, to commit to bringing love forward. It's good for me, and so I use it to remind me who I want to be, but also to return to the place that I want to be, and so that happens to me all day long, every
Hmm.
day, to
I
be
think
in the acknowledging. Yeah, go ahead.
I think this is really interesting territory around what you're sharing of the unknown and also what I'm hearing in this, the essence that is transforming into something that isn't necessarily known, but that you hold space for it, and you can sense it. Like you spoke to people that come together and they can sense that a particular kind of future might be possible, but they can't necessarily articulate it. And this is a really interesting territory also in the context of learning, because our traditional definition of learning is that here is this like body of knowledge that we know, there's no argument about it, right? Or maybe it's science and we know how to do this inquiry, but not so much that here we are to discover something unknown, even in this, even in the context of a word like love, you know, and to what does it mean to be this possibility of love in action. It's I think what's very present for me is that that's not something that has a concrete answer. It's more of a moment to moment inquiry and discovery as far as how you show up in an interaction, and that something in that territory is what offers that transformation, that here I am with Craig and Patricia, and there isn't a formula for how that interaction is going to show up, but there is a way of being that can create a space of love between us that can allow something new to emerge, something that maybe none of us actually expected or predicted. And I feel like there's something in this territory of emergence and not knowing that is key um, to to convening spaces that allow for this. And I wonder if you resonate with that, and just what your reflection has been on, and as far as working with people or inviting groups of people to come together with this aspect of being in relationship to not knowing or to the unknown in some way.
Well, I think it's a shift from expectation to invitation
Hmm.
for starters. That life is an invitation, and that to us, and this whole territory to us is a leadership territory. Yesterday you were quoting Peter Block, I think, about the difference between leadership and management. And you want to speak to that? Because I think that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that that's where I would go, but
Okay.
um, you know, when you talked about emergence and learning, do you mind if I take it in a
No,
slightly
I love
different
it.
direction?
No, do it.
Good.
Yeah.
One of my teachers said, the time for learning is over.
Mm.
And I went, really? What do you mean? He said, yeah, you know everything. We know everything. The time for emergence is here. The time for being is here. You said it, Lorenz. So when you use those two words together, emergence and being, so what are we emerging to? And who are we being as we emerge to that? So a lot of our work, we talk about who we're going to be when we do what we do. So who are we going to be when we're in the world, when we're at the workplace, all of these things. So to make it practical, it's like when we talk about love, love is this internal thing, right? It's this thing that most people can't define, except it's this feeling of well-being or this feeling of connection. I mean, all these words, but you know, the question that comes back to us in our work is, who are we going to be in relationship? Who are we? Who are we in those relationships? Not just with other human beings, but who are we in relationship with everything? So to me, that's the learning piece. That's what to learn. And more and more, I mean, we've been at this for a long time, and we have a model and all of that stuff about, the convening wheel. To me, that's secondary to the question of, who am I going to be with you? Who am I going to be with you? who am I going to be with the world around me? And to me, that's the ultimate question that we're asking ourselves at this moment in time.
How do you go about introducing that question or making that question alive in a group space?
Right, exactly. So I don't think our model, the art of convening wheel, is secondary, because we design to create that space and create that space of invitation. But it's not just a design, or it's not just a model. It's a practice. It's the practice of being.
Yeah.
You're right. I think about learning. For me, the learning all these years has been to learn how to be present to myself so that I can be present to others. And I have learned that through the art of convening.
Through inquiry, and I want to acknowledge some of our mentors, the Peter Blacks and the Meg Wheatleys of the world.
Richard Leiter.
I mean, many. And so a lot of what I think we've learned is around the realm of inquiry, the realm of good questions. So a lot of our work is seated in the questions that we ask ourselves. Right. So when we talk about the convening wheel, we talk about, well, what are the questions we're asking ourselves about where we are in this moment in relationship? What are the questions? Who am I to be in relationship? What is my intent? What is the invitation that I'm offering to people? Things like that are seated in the questions that we ask one another. So it's an open inquiry, not a closed inquiry, not something they're going to learn from me as a teacher or a mentor, but a question that will take oneself, all of ourselves, into a deeper reflection of the essence of who we are. The essence of who we are ultimately is this expression of love.
That's kind of like the biggest question, though, right? The essence of who we are. I just, that's the first thing that pops up for me when you say that is that also is, in a way, the ultimate inquiry to be in relationship with. Who am I? What, because a label like love, what does that mean? But I'm to maybe like land it in something that's maybe more tangible than what is this essence of who I am. How do you approach these questions? Like actually coming up with these questions, is that something that you would do with a group? Is that something you do yourself before a group process comes together? Like what's your particular approach to finding these questions to work with?
Let me give you an example. I was working with many years ago when we were developing the work with the convening wheel and the art of convening, which is the model we've been talking about, but not really, explaining. We're working with a large international corporation around convening, the art of convening, and they wanted to learn how their meetings, could be better, basically. They were saying our meetings suck and we don't know how to do it. We don't know how to shift from, being, trite or being non-productive or whatever it is. And so we introduced a number of questions to a group of people that were in this group, but they were HR people. And we said, what is it? What's the issue that you're really dealing with? And they said, the issue we're really dealing with are how do we get along? How do we give the opportunity to create the highest level of outcome? Well, that's what we're doing.
Kind of an equity question before we knew what equity was, is how do you hear all the voices? How do you gather all the collective, the wisdom, this resident in the room? They wouldn't call it wisdom, but how do you get people engaged, participating at their fullest, I won't even say highest, but at their fullest capacity in a way that they feel as fully contributing. So to me, the experience that people have, a positive experience in a group setting, is that people know why they're there, know what they have to contribute, and are asked to contribute in a way that benefits the whole. And that's the goal of of why, when people ask what do we do and how can we help, that's really the ultimate goal. And when I think about the 5 generations working together, how do you help people contribute in a way and be heard in a way that benefits the whole? So actually, now that I think about it, what we're talking about is wholeness, is creating wholeness in environments that are often fragmented, under duress, under pressure, under resourced a lot of times, behind schedule, or just trying to stay on schedule and stay responsive and responsible. That comes from what the questions are that are being asked and how people are being asked to contribute and take part and collaborate in a way that's meaningful for them, but creates wholeness for everyone.
So back to the example that I was talking about. We started with biography.
That's right.
Who are we?
Yeah.
Who are we? A bit about ourselves. Where do we come from? Who are the influences on our lives? Who are the people? What do our families look like? What are our passions? We work with something called the napkin test. What are the gifts that we bring? What are the passions that we have? What are the values that we have? So
and then we add it on what are your non-negotiable values?
So starting from there begins to open up this conversation about humanity. We're humans in the room. We aren't just a bunch of human doings, we're a bunch of human beings. So slowly we begin to do that. Values is another way to do that. Individual value, when we start to surface individual value and then bring them together with the organizational values, the people begin to see that they're connected. That, oh my gosh, I have the same values you do. And I have the same possibilities and opportunities to meet the values of the organization. When that starts to happen, when the values met with the biographies, with the humanity, we begin to develop trust. And that's what people want inside most organizations. So when we look at those essential levels, we call it the heart of the matter, the intent. What are we inviting people into? What's the context that we're talking about together?
I have a cool short story. And that is, I often present at something, it's an IT conference, government IT professionals. And they are used to very dry, sequential learning opportunities. But the reason they like for us to speak there is that we talk about these questions, and we do the values exercise. And every single time, this is a room of IT professionals who are engineers or come from a very sequential learning background. Every time we do the values exercise, the overriding value that shows up the most when we have people go put their values up on the wall is love. It blows people
Whether
away.
we're talking about engineers, bankers, scientists,
it's love.
IT people.
People see it up on the wall and go, whoa.
And it's not sexuality.
No.
It's not limited.
It's not romantic.
No, it's not. It's usually unconditional. Usually.
Yeah.
That's the relationship.
Yeah.
And so what happens, what we're talking about, and this is very brief, is what people begin to see is the connecting of humanity. They begin to see, oh my gosh, really? I didn't know you felt that way. I feel that way too.
Like I've known you for 20 years
Right.
and we've never had this
Never
conversation.
had this one. Now we are connected. Well, what does connection mean at the essential level? What is that really about? Well, we call it love. You can call it a lot of different things. But when you're really connected, when you have that sense of seeing people, we use a term called the arc of recognition in our work. When you feel seen in your essence, I mean, people really seeing you, I see you, right? By simultaneously seeing the other, there's that arc of recognition, right? Where we're recognizing each other in our essence. That's a powerful, powerful recognition of that connection.
And transformational.
And it's totally transformational for most people because we're being seen while seeing the other in who we really are. And that's achievable. We've experienced that in our work time and time again. And it can be very subtle. You know, people will leave one of our gatherings and go, I don't know what the hell just happened. I really have no idea. But man, that was intense. That was really amazing because I really felt like I was being seen, not just for what I do in the world, but who I really am. To me, that is a mark of huge success for us.
Yeah. And there's physiology, research in physiology that confirms all of this. Judith Glaser developed conversational intelligence and did a lot of research in this field to quantify, if you can, what we're talking about. But it's real.
There's something about what you're saying related to you used the word wholeness earlier, which is also one of these really interesting terms to unpack in the context of what we consider wholeness, what we consider fragmentation, and the role of surfacing something and seeing something. It's that I'm always whole, but I might not feel whole because there's a whole bunch of things that are present for me that are unacknowledged or that are present in the background of my experience that another person is not aware of. And when they have an opportunity to be seen in the way that you're seeing, and what does it mean to really see somebody? I think there's so many dimensions to that, because one dimension is that I'm so present with you, I'm seeing you, and another dimension is that I actually have an opportunity to become aware of things that I may not be aware of, you know, in the context of, say, a space where there's racial differences. Maybe I'm aware of the fact that I'm white in a space, and that just that alone might have an impact. So there's so many dimensions to seeing that that I feel like offer a rich territory on this idea of what it means to invite wholeness into a space.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
I think the other dimension for me around this subject of wholeness or surfacing what might be in a space is the challenge that might come with that. You know, like that sometimes surfacing what's really present for people is a difficult conversation and uncomfortable can cause a rupture, can be more than a space can hold. And I wonder, I know you guys have done a lot of work holding difficult spaces. I was really inspired by the work you did after the murder of George Floyd, bringing people together in your city. I'd love to hear some reflections on how you navigate difficult conversational spaces.
You want to start?
Well, you brought up our work with George Floyd. I mean, I think there's
the aftermath.
In the aftermath of George, right? We live in Minneapolis, by the way, where it all happened. And we live about 2 miles from where George Floyd was murdered. In the aftermath of that, during the so-called riots or insurrection, as it's called here, our city council members were just being racked with calls and emails, and the city was just totally traumatized. And as most people know, the city was burning, was in lockdown, and I approached our city council member in our ward and said, let's bring the people together in our ward. What do you think? On Zoom. You know, we weren't going to do it in person. And she said, well, we've got to do it fast if we're going to do it. And by the way, I don't think we should do it, because I think what'll happen is people will just yell at me and scream at me, because that's what's happening. I've already gotten thousands of emails.
Right.
We said, no, let's give it a shot. I think we have a plan or a design that we can bring people together and hear one another and to listen to one another.
As neighbors.
As neighbors, right, as neighbors. So it was a neighborhood call. And so we planned this thing out, and 2 hours later, or 4 hours later, we had 300 people on a Zoom call with our council member. And we gave her 3 questions.
Well,
go ahead.
That 4 hours, though, the ability to respond quickly in a moment of panic and trauma was enabled by the 20 years of practice that we've been engaged in through our work. So it didn't just come out of the blue, it came out of our practices, out of our work, and out of our community. So we knew not to do this alone. We pulled together half a dozen conveners. This was in the time of Zoom bombing. And we pulled together, we had a security plan. They would help us hold space. So there were 8 of us holding space for these 300 people that included our council person and her team. And
we said, here's the design. We're going to give you 20 minutes to talk about, what do you know? What don't you know? What can't you say? And what should we all be doing right now? Now, total transparency.
Right. And how can we support each other?
And we asked the people on the call to put in their questions, and we said to folks, we created a container by offering up agreements and protocols. Here are the agreements that we're going to be hearing from, and we gave them the context of what we'll be doing. And we asked them to be on mute, and we asked them to put their questions, comments, or whatever they wish in the chat. And that we asked people to really listen, to really seek to understand, because we're all in this together. We're all experiencing this together. We're all neighbors together. And so we're asking us to seek to understand and to be of service to one another.
Which is one of the common principles of conversation and dialogue. Seek to understand and be of service.
And then we asked people to do a thumbs up if they agreed or not, or shake their head. And most people did, because almost everybody was on video. And we asked people to be on video so they could be seen, not to be off video so that they were lurkers, and so we got that.
And all of these simple building blocks, because that's what they are, principles of conversation and dialogue and our practices, they're building blocks. They're the outcome. There were two significant outcomes. One was that there was this one guy in the chat, and our people and her people were monitoring the chat and sending her question.
The city council member.
The city council person. And there was this one guy that was particularly snarky in the chat. And at one point, we just asked him to, private messaged him to just hold space and hold his whole council, or I forget what the words were that we used. at the end, there was time for people to speak. He spoke briefly, but what he put in the chat was, this is what civil society looks like, where we can come together and be neighbors, listen, and move in a positive way forward. So we all left knowing what we needed to do, which was to not perpetuate rumors that were, there were so many wild rumors flying around of people coming into town and they're going to set fire and bombs in our alley trash cans. And I mean, seriously, everybody had a to-go bag.
I'll be right back.
To get out of the city if something really went down, because that's how, I mean, we were literally the city was burning and we all had our to-go bags by the door. And I had people saying, why are you still in the city? Get out of the city. My relatives were saying, buy a gun. You're going to need a gun. I mean, that's how it was, so tense. And at the end of it, we did 2 meetings for our council person, 2 or 3. But then the other evidence was the city council president, who had the most contentious ward. People, and they were there. That's where a lot of the activity and burnings and lockdowns and fear were really happening. We convened a meeting for her ward and got the exact same results of people calming down, feeling themselves in the presence of each other so that they could listen and come to some way of moving forward together in common purpose and shared values. Well, that's purposeful leadership in my book. And it's got nothing to do with the title and everything to do with intentions set in a shared environment of common values, common purpose. So that's our story about that.
If there was one essential characteristic or quality that you would say contributed to making that space coherent in this way, what would you say it is? Or I mean, earlier you alluded to these building blocks. Maybe it's a collection of all these little building blocks, but if there was one thing that if someone was going to take away and say, this is the essential thing to include in a space that I'm convening for a difficult conversation.
And I love that you use the word coherence.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. What would you say?
I think 2 things. One is vulnerability. It asks the city council person to be really vulnerable and very open, which she was. The other were the agreements and protocols, and us asking for them up front and being a request.
Participation in that way.
Saying that we are a community, we're a neighborhood here, we're Ward 13. And
or
getting
Ward 10
or whatever the ward was that we were working with, and that we're neighbors and we're here together to talk about something that's happening in our neighborhood. And we really hope that we can have this conversation to really learn from one another, to learn from our city council member, but also the agreements and protocols and getting them to accept them.
Right.
And people did, and they visually could see their neighbors doing this. Right. And
to create the conditions of mutual trust and respect.
Exactly.
And so what a lot of times,
we didn't know whether it would work or
no,
not,
we didn't.
whether they'd be yelling at us or we'd have to put everybody on mute.
Right.
We asked them to put themselves on mute rather than us muting.
Right.
And they did.
So we asked for, so it was the expectation of personal accountability, but the mutual trust and respect is, again, it's words, but that's if that's the condition, you have to extend trust to get trust.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of building blocks that create the confidence to go there. It takes courage to do this work. It takes courage. It took so much courage for us to propose this to the council people, to set it up, to invite people, and then to invite them. And we don't ever say it's rules. we say protocols and agreements, or agreements and protocols, but and knowing that people have to consent to this kind
Right.
of new, or maybe not new behavior, consent to this kind of participation, this kind of collaboration. And we acknowledge that it took courage for all of them to be there in this space.
Right.
It was courage on the council person's part, courage on our part, and it takes courage on their part to show up as accountable in their own accountability as citizens and neighbors.
Yeah. As you asked that question, what's coming up for me, and I've thought about this, is that we were all in a very dramatic, traumatic experience together.
There's
So
that too.
we were together and everybody knew it, because we didn't know whether or not this mayhem would reach our neighborhoods because the 3rd Precinct police station was burning down that night. And you know, people were just petrified. And so there was an essence of them being able to really listen very deeply to what the request was and to respond in a way. I mean, we were surprised too. I mean, I was surprised. I didn't know what the hell to expect, except, hey, we're going to give this a go. You know, if we don't do it, I don't know what would happen, but this was really an important thing for us to do, and a real learning for us as conveners, as gatherers and holders of people, you know, to really attempt something like this. And it was just amazing.
I love this. I love this reflection on courage and vulnerability, because this is an extreme example you're talking about. You know,
Yes.
like a highly charged issue, but the emphasis on courage, I think, is significant in a lot of different contexts. Like last year, we worked with a large organization that was interested in cultivating deeper quality of relational collaboration. And the person leading that initiative, it took them a lot of courage to spearhead this kind of project, a relational, touchy-feely kind of thing, in an environment that wasn't particularly attuned to that. You know, so there's something about the courage of stepping into taking on a project where you're really inviting a different quality of presence than the regular, maybe more scientific or transactional information-based orientation that many people are comfortable with. And I think the other side is that is very relevant here is the vulnerability piece of and it's a fine line, and I'm curious how you hold that line sometimes, because there's, you know, I find when I hold a space, I absolutely agree that vulnerability and that really the quality of being that shows up in the space is very much modeled by me in a way, through my willingness to just be open about things that might not be perfect, or when I make a mistake, or whatever, like where I'm willing to be uncomfortable about whatever might be present for me. And then I always find there's an interesting territory between providing enough stability and structure. Like if I'm holding a space and I'm having an internal meltdown because of, you know, something going on, sometimes it's inappropriate to share that, but sometimes it's not. You know, sometimes that's just not what this particular space needs, because it needs something that offers more stability. And so I'm curious how your reflections on this territory of courage and vulnerability, and how you navigate that within yourself depending on the space that you might be holding.
I have an example.
Okay.
So speaking of large systems, we're working with a bank, and there was a retreat of 350 bankers, and the president of the bank had been working with us and knew our work. And so we did 2 shifts, 175 bankers in each shift, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, sitting in circle. Actually 4 concentric circles. Right. They'd never sat in a circle before as a group. And what was very simple was the president stepping forward and being extremely vulnerable and saying, we're going to try something you've never tried before. But if we're going to get to where we want to go, if we're going to get to what our goal here as an organization, we're going to have to get to know each other in a much different way than we have. And so simply what we did was we went around the circle and we asked the question, your name, your affiliation, and then
meaning your role
in the organization, and one or two words that reflect your current condition, right? And then we prompted it and said, things like happy, sad, vulnerable, curious, whatever. And then we gave them to hold a talking piece, if you will, an emblem of their brand, right, to pass to each other. And we said, this is what you do. You hold this, and then you pass it to the next person when you're done. You say your name, your affiliation, and one or two words. So the first person goes, Bob, finance. Okay, next person. By the sixth person, it was like, hi, I'm Babette, and I'm in HR, and I'm feeling really curious. Then the next person was, hi. All of a sudden, by the time we got to the 175th person, everybody's leaning forward instead of this.
Right.
Mm.
So what happened? What happened? And it wasn't just, the president, a woman, saying, you're going to do this. It was like, I'm getting an insight into the people I work with, and it's okay. I'm not going to die.
But the invitation, as you said, was if we're going to get to where we need to go, we have to do something different.
Yeah.
We have to be different, and we have to be different together. And this is a way to start that process.
And she was vulnerable,
yeah,
asking this because it was totally out of their context, sitting in circle, and also asking people to speak. But more so, it was very courageous of people to speak.
Yeah.
Very.
I'm curious if you, Patricia, go ahead. You look like you're about to add something.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm just curious if you have any undercover strategies that you bring out in some situations. So, for example, earlier you talked about this really subtle thing that I loved, which was that you when you welcome people into the Zoom call with the city council, you had them mute themselves, and so it's this invitation to micro agency, right? That you could have just muted everyone, but here a person is actually doing it themselves, and in a subtle way, you're this is a strong word, but in a subtle way, you're forcing participation. And that's one of the reasons why I love embodied practices, because you can't Netflix embodied practices, right? They're implicitly participatory, and so there's something about, like I said, force is a strong word, but there's something about creating the conditions where people have to participate that I think is really powerful. And the subtlety of we're just going to get people to mute themselves. And just now, so sometimes when I'm in a space where I expect people might be more reserved, I might think about who I call on first, because that first person sets the precedent, for everyone else. So if it's Bob who's like, okay, I mean, it can work, like you said, 6 people and it changes, but if the first person is really expressive and more vulnerable, like the president, for example, or the first 3 people, then that kind of can jumpstart the situation. So I wonder if you have any kind of like bag of tricks techniques that you think about sometimes when you're entering a space where you kind of sense that it might be a little more challenging, as far as like little subtle things that you've acquired over your lifetime of working with groups.
You know, something that comes to mind, and again, like you said, forcing participation, it's, is that we give permission. And now, is it mine to give to another adult? Give them permission, but that is a stance to give permission for people internally. I am thinking about how to give them permission for agency, autonomy, and participation in a way that maybe they haven't thought of or haven't been able to express before. That's why something like hearing all the voices is so important. And you know, I wish we'd done that yesterday. We were at a speaking engagement, and of course, it's the Tuesday morning after New Year's Day, so it's 7:30 in the morning after New Year's Day, and everybody's, you know, it was a challenge right there. But the minute everybody gets to say even just one word, even one syllable, you could just say one syllable if that's all you think you have time for. People do not understand the magic of that.
Yeah.
That once someone has had their voice spoken and then heard, it changes everything. It changes their thought processes, it changes their body processes, it changes their physiology, just even to say one syllable. We weren't able to do that with the 350 people, but on
well,
Zoom,
what we did do,
we did do, go ahead.
We gave them, we said, you may pass if you wish to pass, if you're not ready, right? Which is, yeah, which was really important because, and very few people did, by the way. And then we said, well, you know, we'll pass, but we'll come back to you,
and see if you're ready.
See if you're ready.
And on Zoom, the corollary of that, if you know, it's really hard to do that on Zoom. So that's why we use the chat, and we invite people to, you know, if we can't call on them to speak one by one by one, and because we have done that as well, the closest thing to it, it's not wonderful, is the chat. But there's something giving people permission to participate, not just an invitation, but there's the active part of giving permission for their autonomy, their agency. That's really all that I ever really want to achieve in a gathering. You know, exchange of information is great. Real participation is gold. What were you going to say?
Lorenz, behind your question was, how do we get people perhaps to that place without it being a forced march? Without it feeling like, oh my God, why are they doing this to me? A lot of that is in the so-called setup. It's being really clear about the purpose. Why are we here? What's the intent of what we're planning to do today? What's the invitation that gets put out? The genuine invitation that really, you know, is genuine, that creates a sense of hospitality. It creates a sense of belonging in the invitation.
And invitation to them.
Right.
So that they know why they're there and what they're expected to do, too.
And what's the context? What's the context in which we're doing this? The why. Right? And then what we just described around agreements and protocols is what we call creating the container, the safety. We use the language of welcome, safety, and belonging. How do we create the space for welcome, safety, and belonging? When we create the container, we acknowledge the space that we're in, right? What is the space that we're in? In this sense, with the bankers, it was a circle that they hadn't been in before. So we acknowledge that. And then the agreements. So what are the norms? What are the norms? We acknowledge the norms of what they're used to. And then we talked about the agreements and protocols of what we were doing there. So what happens 9 times out of 10, people can exhale. And their mind starts churning because we've really created context. We've created a container. We've reiterated why they're there, what the intent and all of that. So there's a better chance of folks not feeling put upon, or, as I said before, a forced march.
We also try to match language without compromising.
Yeah.
Just like you, our language is very intentional. It's intended to achieve the goals, express the values, and get the participation that we want. So our language is very intentional. And then sometimes we modify to meet people where they are. And also, I just have to go back to that internal stance. You used the word touchy feely before, or woo woo.
That's our next book.
Yeah.
True.
We've talked
I
about
love
this
it.
for that. I hold the stand. I used to go, oh, touchy feely. Yes, I'm good. I'm being accused of being touchy feely. Well, now what I realized was, yes, it's the ability to be touched and to feel. And that is an okay place to be. In today's, we'll go back to multi-generational, the younger generations are way more emotive than I ever was in work. They know what it means to be touched and to feel, even if it's, kind of been pushed out of them, if they've been in a setting, an organizational setting that doesn't encourage it, or it's been tamped down. But, in a multicultural, multimodal, multi-generational world, the ability to be touched and to feel is how you know where you are, who you are while you do what you do, so that you really can be with people and meet whatever need is present. Respond versus react. Be with versus whatever. Yeah.
I think this is also coming back to where we started the conversation about the nature and possibility of transformation in a context where that next step may be unknown, that the path to that is what touches you and is being connected to the sense of feeling. It's not necessarily an intellectual concept that you can articulate, like so many things in that make the human experience what it is are in this domain of being touched and feeling. And when that's invited into a group space, that offers a tremendous intelligence. It offers its own intelligence. And I think that's at the heart of what we're pointing at here is really tapping into the power of that intelligence.
Yes,
Brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. Collective intelligence,
And
collective hearts, collective
wisdom.
I mean, it's just, to me, that's where people are hungering for. That level of connection, that level of I am connected to you in a way I don't know yet really how, but let's give it a shot here. Let's see how we might be able to do that together.
Yeah, and maybe even at its very basic essence is I matter. You matter, I matter, and
we matter.
We matter. Yeah.
I love that. Craig, Patricia, thank you so much. It's been a rich conversation. I feel like we could go on for hours and unpack so many nuances here. We kind of covered like the first third of the convening wheel, and I really appreciate the emphasis on the foundation of the context and the container, because I feel like that's the heart of being able to hold a transformational space, to hold a space that can support people in reconnecting with their humanity and reconnecting with each other in a deeper way. So just want to deeply acknowledge both of you for your lifetime of work and the incredible contribution that you make to people's lives and to my life. And yeah, thank you for the conversation.
The honor is ours.
Yeah, and love to Natasha, please.
She's with us in spirit in every conversation.